If you get nothing from this video, you need to go pick up an Alys Arden book right now. Hey BookTube, it's me Alexis, and today I'm coming to you with my August wrap-up.
So many books to read, a whole life ahead of me.
August was a tough month for me, and I am really proud to say that I finished 5 books with as busy as the month was for me outside of my reading life. And the 5 books are The Casca Girls by Alys Arden, Gods of Jaden Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, Sword of Fire by J.A Culican, Ember of Darkness by J.A Culican, and then The Romeo Catchers by Alys Arden. So those 5 books, if you just saw the covers for them real briefly, they are all very beautiful covers. The cover that I was most excited about was Gods of Jaden Shadow. That cover, when I first saw it, do you ever see covers and you just want like a poster of them? Like I just want like my wall to have like posters of book covers, because some of them are just so aesthetic and so beautiful. Gods of Jaden Shadow would be on that list for sure, along with like every cover by Patricia McKillop. I mean, come on, Patricia McKillop's covers are amazing. And then like the splintered cover, I love it. Okay, so I have a lot of covers that I just love. The Romeo Catchers is the sequel to the Casca Girls. So, what is the Casca Girls about? You might be asking. I am obsessed with New Orleans. I've been there before, and I love the city, I love the atmosphere, I loved everything about it, and I've read so many books. A lot of my favorite books actually take place there. They'll have like fantasy elements in New Orleans where it's just, there's so much. New Orleans is such an old, ancient melting pot, and I've actually considered going to grad school there, or at least, like, I want some part of my life, like, I think a lot of people dream of living in New York or LA, like, when they get up and move and go to the big city, but I really just want to go to New Orleans. I just want to, like, stay there, maybe for, like, 6 months or something, just, like, really immerse myself in that city. Every time I read a book that takes place there, I feel it all over again. I just feel the nostalgia. I just feel this energy about New Orleans in books that I love. And if you have any good recs of really enjoyable New Orleans books that you have read, please comment them down below if they're science fiction and fantasy. So what is the Casca Girls about? You've heard me talk about New Orleans, now you know it takes place in New Orleans, but what else happens in the story? Well, friend, the Casca Girls is an old legend of New Orleans. Basically, when New Orleans was first being populated, they needed more people to live there. Basically, the story of the Casca Girls is that there's these women who were sent, they were either criminals or they were pulled from brothels. They're from less credible sources, to say the least, and they were all put on a boat and sent to New Orleans to they were like, we need more women in the city. There's the women. We got these women traveling from France to New Orleans, and along the way, they came with caskets. They were told that that was their dowry, that it would be filled with gold and money and valuables and anything to set them up with a good dowry so they can get married. And what every woman wants, right, to get married. And instead, these caskets were filled with vampires. So each casket had a vampire in it. And the women started realizing that there was something off about their caskets, that there was something off about the journey, and they started noticing certain people would go missing, or certain things would happen that was supernatural. And by the time they got to New Orleans, they figured out it was vampires. They themselves figured out they were witches. And together, they built a coven and locked these vampires up. Many years later, their descendants are faced with these vampires again, and it is the descendants' journey to figure out how to address the whole vampire situation. And I didn't think I was going to like it, because there was kind of a love triangle in it. It was just a minor one. It didn't take away from the story, and that's the only way that I will read a book that has love triangles in it, if it's not the whole point of the story. If there's more to the plot than there being a love triangle. Okay, so Ardell is our fire witch. She's the main star of the show. She's our protagonist, and the story starts off right after Hurricane Katrina. Our author grew up in New Orleans, and she's lived through many hurricanes and seen the aftermath in New Orleans plenty of time. And I think this was an important element to see in books when we're talking about the city of New Orleans. She does a good job of talking about how the process of fixing up the city and how slow it was, and how they didn't always have food because they didn't always have running water, because they didn't always have walls because there was literally chunks of the wall missing, or buildings collapsed and schools were relocated, so everyone there had to move. There's just so many things that I could probably imagine. I couldn't think of it as detailed as she does, and that it really enriched the story for me. The fact that Katrina was prevalent and so it executed so well in the story, that I loved it. So yeah, the rest of our coven, I really won't say who they are because it's kind of fun to figure it out. There was so many times during the book where I was like holding on, like I was literally like curling my toes in my bed, like oh no, like I like got scared, like I was like what's happening, like I haven't felt that way in a book for a long time, and that's why I've just spent, you know, like all this time talking about that book because it was amazing. And if you like New Orleans fantasies, you should check it out. The next book that I read, Gods of Jaden Shadow. This book is about Cassiopeia. I really like, I should listen to how you pronounce this somewhere, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So we're sticking with Cassiopeia. Anyway, she is the daughter of a very conservative Christian family where her mother married a man that wasn't of as much prestige as her grandfather, so her mother was kind of shamed for it, and her father is dead, I believe. I can't remember, but he's not in the picture anymore. I'm pretty sure he's dead. And so Cassiopeia and her mother kind of work as servants for her grandfather. They do a lot of the cooking and cleaning and run the errands. Our main girl, Cassiopeia, is left at home one afternoon and discovers her chest in her grandfather's bedroom or bathroom or in the house in general that contains the bones of a deceased Mayan god of the underworld. And he wants his throne back. So when she opened the case, she kind of bonded her soul to him, and her life force is like being shared with his until he becomes a god again. So she's forced to figure out how to get him to be a god again or die trying. Those are basically her only two options. Which, if you just think of that premise, any book that starts with a quest that severe, you kind of know what the outcome is. It's not really a shock, but we read these books anyway because there's something about it that's like, how is she gonna do it? This is so entertaining. Can she actually do it? Because even though you read that, you don't actually know how it's gonna end. And I thought I knew how it was gonna end. I had this picture in my head. I was like, easy, it's gonna be like this. That didn't happen at all. Like, I was 70% correct, but the 30% incorrect is what shocked me. That's why I rated it 4 stars. And I forgot to mention I rated the first book in the Casca Girls 4 stars as well. So every book that I did read this month, I rated it really high. I didn't have any books below 3 stars, which is really rare for me, because typically I have some books that I just don't like. Our main girl, Cassiopeia, has to travel on this quest to restore his missing body parts, which I believe is a finger, an eye, and an ear. The whole time, his twin brother is set up against her. He's the god who's now on the throne, and it's her against her cousin who's like working for the other god. I think the book was brilliant. I think it was beautiful. I will reread it. I want to reread it right now. Again, that's the one with the beautiful cover. I just look at it. It's gorgeous. There's Mayan mythology in it. It's another own voices, where their author is actually Hispanic. The only downfall of this book was that I felt like she missed an opportunity. I understand that books are written years before they're published and that the publishing process takes years if you're not like a big name author, or even if you are, it still takes a long time to go from the first word on a page to the book being on a shelf and sold. So I understand that happened. However, a couple weeks ago there was a massive shooting in El Paso. That's not too far of a drive from where I am in Texas. I just was wanting to say that there was a big shooting that happened in El Paso, and I think something about like the border could have been mentioned more. This book takes place in the 1800s, so it couldn't have been like the exact reference to that exact situation, but the only really topic that was brought up about the border was alcohol, that you couldn't have alcohol in the United States at this time, but you could in Mexico, so everyone was down in Cancun. I see y'all. But I also understand that this is fantasy, and when you're reading a fantasy book, you don't really want to be stuck in the realities of people being forced to choose their family or their kid's future. And I get I get why it wasn't in the book, but I also think it could have been a little bit more, but I'm not disappointed. I'm still loving the book just as much, even though it's not there. So just food for thought, you know? The third book that I read was Sword of Fire by J.A Culican. I'm butchering everyone's name. I barely know my own, like, bear with me. So this book had dragon shapeshifters in it. I've never read a book that had dragon shapeshifters in it, and maybe that's because I haven't read enough old fae including books, but dragon humans. This book, there's the impoverished fae who have the ability to tend to crops and like make nature respond to them, but they are they're considered cowardly people, but they're not cowardly. They just know what their needs are, and they don't stray out of. They're not driven by greed. They're driven by their love for nature. And then you have the dragons who kind of rule the whole society. The throne is held by dragons. They're the ones who make all the decisions, make the fae to be used as slaves almost. And I think that this book was really enjoyable because of how much the nature influence of the Fey magic was brought into it, but also talking a lot about the classes, what is greed and why greed can be a factor in class division. And for a middle grade book, this had a lot of deep thought-provoking elements to it that I didn't expect to be there. My only complaint with this series is that the first 2 were available on audiobook for like a couple dollars, like under $5, and the third one was like $17. Excuse me? You think I felt led on because the ending of the second book, which I also read this month, was very good, and then it just has to go and be almost $20 to listen to it. I could not be lazy and read it, but like I was listening to the other 2, so I want to listen to the third one. It's okay. It's fine. Even though it is a middle grade book, it has a middle grade level romance to it, which is a lot of the like beating around the bush romance, like, oh, is he looking at me? I don't know. Do I like him? I don't know. Like, I know I do, but he can't possibly like me. Or no, she's so beautiful, she can't possibly want to be with me. And it's just like when I read books like this, I'm just like, ah. But again, it was middle grade romance, but middle grade very well done. And I also gave this one 4 stars. And so those are the 3 main books that I read. If you don't know anything about either of those 3 books, or if you do know something, then I've also read the sequel to the Casca Girls, which is the Romeo Catchers, and the sequel to Sword of Fire, which is Ember of Darkness. And I like the sequels just as much as I like the first book. I actually think I liked the sequel Romeo Catchers more than the first book because, I don't know, like Alys Arden, if you get nothing from this video, you need to go pick up an Alys Arden book right now. Look at her rainbow hair. She is a Mika Chen in real life. And those are the 5 books that I read in August. This is a short one, short and sweet. I just want to list the books I'm currently reading, and those are Spin the Dawn, which if you haven't heard of Spin the Dawn, is described as Project Runway meets Mulan, and it's definitely that. I still have like 60 pages left, so I'm planning on finishing it today. And then I'm going to work on finishing The Collapsing Empire. John Scalzi. If you're not following John Scalzi on Twitter, every time he tweets something I always chuckle. Like, or he posts really endearing things about his wife. And yeah, that's it. Those are the 5 books I read last month, and the 2 books I'm currently reading. If you have read any of these books, or if you're really excited to read any of these books, comment down below. As always, follow me on Goodreads if you want to see what books I'm reading up to date. There's a lot of books that I don't mention on my channel because I either don't actually finish them. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you have any NOLA suggestions for me, comment down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
If I knew then what I know now, I give myself a souvenir for old time's sake. Cause I got all that I need here, and I'm good, yeah.
And we are being listened to. Excuse me, Siri. I don't trust technology.
Can do all things. Mama always
So
told me
have
it
to
would
talk
be
about Casca Girls.
alright.
You know what?
I
You
thought
loved
I
it.
needed to rush, but there was never enough.